thanks to everyone for attending, and especially to our esteemed group of guests that we have with us here today. I'd like to welcome everyone to a discussion entitled Revising Eastern Europe: Situated Practices and Authoritarian Regimes, which was designed around a beautiful book that is still yet to come out, I think, in the next few months or a few more months, by Zdenka Badovinac, one of Eastern Europe's most distinguished curators and museum directors. The book, entitled Situated Curating: Unannounced Voices of Change, is a new book in the MA Curatorial Practices Thoughts on Curating series, published by Sternberg Press. And against the spreading, against the backdrop of spreading authoritarianism, as well, and not to mention the still spiking numbers of the pandemic itself. Today, Zdenka will speak with curator iLiana Fokianaki, artist Ištvan Huzjan, and St. Petersburg-based and Dmitry Vilensky from the St. Petersburg-based artist collective Chto Delat, about reprised forms of oppression and emerging artistic responses of solidarity that Zdenka focuses on. In the book, of course, the book was written before the current situation, and as we all know, it's common in Eastern Europe, as in many other parts of the world, to deal with the post-war scenario. And now I think we all have to shift our thinking and speaking to deal with the current hot war scenario as well. But I think it makes it all the more important to consider what emerging artistic practices of solidarity actually do and mean, especially in this climate of increasing nationalism. So my name is Brian Kwan Wood. I'm the Director of Research at the MA Curatorial Practice, and on behalf of myself and the chair of the program, Stephen Henry Madoff, I'd like to welcome you all. And I think after the discussion, we should have around 10 minutes or so for questions from the audience. I think you can type questions into the chat as they come up. Or if you're comfortable being recorded, you can also unmute yourself and join the discussion. I think that would be fine today. Many thanks to our guests for taking the time to join us today from different time zones, different difficult situations. I'd like to turn it all over to Zdenka.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you for organizing it, and thank you, Stephen. Stephen is the editor of my book that is coming out in June, right? The book was written now almost 2 years ago, and it seems that we need to start talking also about what has been done and what happened in the period between, let's say metaphorically, 2 books. It doesn't mean that I write at the moment a new book, but still, the after period is becoming more and more important, because the situation in the world is changing more and more rapidly. So if I think what happened to my country, to me personally, and of course to the world around me, and now war in Europe, so it's really I don't have a right word how to then define the perspectives. So what can our future be if the things are going to change with a stronger tempo, that we have more and more events that affect so strongly our lives as pandemic did, as now the war is. But I want to say that this the only war at the moment we have. This is for the start. We are all shocked with the situation, but the things, I was a year ago in Ethiopia, for example, which is the flight distance is 7 hours, like to New York, but nobody knows actually what is going on in Ethiopia, for example. And then we have, we have also different categories for the refugees now. It's really a disaster what is happening now in Europe. Almost 2 million of refugees from Ukraine, but nobody talks anymore about the refugees that are kept here in the territory of former Yugoslavia and Bosnia and Herzegovina. And so it's important to also to talk more about the different aspects of the situation that we are at the moment caught in. But because of the situation, we are talking more and more about the change. We want to have this big change, and nobody knows where it will come from and who will bring the change. And I think, and this is somehow one of the messages of this small book, it is that the change will come unannounced. The voices that are bringing the change will be unannounced, which means that all the structures that we are working and living in are probably not fitting the actual situation anymore, that we need something in the field of art. We can talk about, as it is a book of curating, then we can discuss the curatorship today from the angle if the curatorship is something, must be something professional, for example, or, are the things that are so important for our life only on this to be solved only on the side of so-called professionals. We learned lessons from Greta, from a child, when we had this catastrophe became visible. So we need, obviously, we need unprofessionals, we need children, we need non-human beings to teach us how to proceed, what would be the best change for us to avoid the catastrophes that are, happening one after the other. So somehow the book, it is about, although written 2 years ago, but it is about when an epidemic starts. It is about the fact that the curatorship is not only something that should be realized in the safe zone. That is happening, that what is interesting about the curatorship today is happening beyond the safe zones of the art institutions. And this fact leads to the question, who are actually then curators? How this division of the roles between the curators and the artists and all other different participants in so-called art project. So this division, I think, became somehow obsolete. I think it's more about the partnership and collaboration between different people engaged and interested in collaboration. Doesn't matter if they are professionals and what kind of professionals they are. Yeah, so, I try to, the title is Situated Curating, and somehow it relates to the text of Dora Haraway, Situated Knowledge, from, I think, 89. I have to say that at that time I didn't know about the text. I read it only recently, and it would help me a lot if I would read it then at the beginning of the 90s, because it is somehow about the things that I've been doing through all my life. But what is situated, I think, should be discussed from very specific points of view. There is no universal answer to the question, what is situated knowledge, what is situated curatorship. But I can, maybe there is a short sentence that I can read from Dora Haraway's text that somehow can help me to clarify it. So situated knowledge requires that the object of knowledge be pictured as an actor and agent, not as a screen or a ground or a resource, never finally as a slave to the master that closes off the dialectic in his unique agency and his authorship of objective knowledge. So I think this, how she discusses the objective knowledge in the text is something important for us also today. It claims the participation also in this knowledge production that we so-called curators and institutions are involved with very different other agents. So the book, I started to write it 2 years ago when the pandemic starts, and the pandemic turned everything, what we have been doing to the local. So everybody was looking how his or her neighbor feels, or how to help, how the infrastructure, the different sources are organized that people would, fight the pandemic better. And this is something what made me also to think local beyond beyond this narrow understanding of local, because at the same time when we were in lockdowns, we opened, of course, our computers and started discussing mostly via Zooms. And I think that this moment when you are mute and unmute since then has been meaning a lot, so it means that who has a voice has a power today. And the voice, I wrote a little bit on the my understanding of the voice, which is in my case, I use it instead of the body, for example. So voice is something that is situated in our body, but at the same time, something that connects us with others the most. So the voice can be understood from these perspectives, but always, of course, in relational to the others. So the book lists a lot of art projects and practices, but all of them, the common dominator, I would say, of them is the fight for the common good, for the solidarity, and of course about the explosion of the common evil, I would say. So the question is, of course, how much we can do in the frame of the existing art system, how much we can really fight for the common good, how much we can detect the common evil. I think that the existing art world is mostly about the inclusion, about the political correctness, which I think is in many cases okay. It helps, so we have more, equality in terms of gender, race, all these different things. But it doesn't change really the system that generates all the catastrophes that we are listing today. The problem is really this capitalist system, and the artists that I and the project that are in the book are mostly also about this need to the deep for the deep change. So the question is, of course, again, how to think, what to propose, how to envision the better world. It's not so easy today, and sometimes it's important to rediscuss, to revisit our past, especially the socialist past. In our case, in Eastern Europe, you know, it's forbidden almost to talk about, in some cases, about socialism. It became very marginalized, you know, Red Star, you know, the symbols of socialism. Only in Croatia, 3,000 partisan monuments were destroyed in the 90s, just after the big change there. And sometimes I have a feeling that there are only the artists who keep the memory. We are revisiting and going back, and Dimitri is with us, Ištvan is with us, who can also refer to their concrete projects. And I refer to the situation in Syria also in the book, and iLiana can also tell us more about her project with Rojava film Commune. So what kind of things can be done during the war? We were just discussing before with Dimitri about the situation in Russia. Dimitri was just repeating, I don't know what to be done. Chto Delat. Yeah, so it's not easy, of course. So I think it's time just to start the discussion. And maybe, iLiana, I ask you the first question. As you know, 2 years ago, that was the issue of the war, and nobody was dreaming about the war we have today. So how can we think about the war more in general terms, and how to relate the very, very positive case, the example from Rojava. You know, I think it is something that it is important actually that we are not passive. Also, when we are in terrible, tragic situation, that we try to find a way to stay creative. That's one of the important messages that I got from your project. Maybe you can tell more.
Well, thank you very much also for Stephen and for Brian for the invitation, and for Zdenka for writing another amazing book, because the previous one has been a book that I've been going back to, and I think they're both related also. I wanted also first to just maybe bounce off a little bit on the things you said, because you said a lot of quite important things. I mean, this idea of situated knowledges, you said it's something that you have been doing. And I think a lot of people have been kind of doing it without knowing it, or without naming it, or without having the, let's say, the academic framework of a Donna Haraway to name it as such. But what is more interesting for me from her theory is this idea of how these knowledges change shape. They are reshaped constantly because of situations. Of course, they're embodied. I'm not sure I agree completely. We can have a whole discussion of whether someone can stand alongside people. Rojava Film Commune is one example, without sharing their struggles, as in without having to live their reality, but by sharing the ideological struggles. So the embodied for me sometimes is a little bit, I prefer much more the word situated rather than looking into embodiment. And this geohistorical also that she mentions, I think is quite important. But for me, the most interesting curatorially, if we want to think of this terminology of hers for curating, is this idea of changing shape, of being reshaped. And also, I think it was extremely important that you said, yeah, of course, we have all this political correctness of diversifying, but the institution as well itself does not diversify enough. And through the research that we have been doing also with the Bureau of Care, we see exactly that the institution remains careless, and the diversifying is more kind of like a cosmetic touch up, on the outside, but the infrastructures and the power structures don't change, and that is the problem. What is interesting, though, is that many times at times of crisis, be it a war, and now I'm going to go into the Rojava Film Commune example, infrastructures or current, let's say, status quos really are shaking up. And somehow you need to kind of redistribute and redefine them and find them anew. And just to link like curating an institution or instituting, as Sarah Rifki would say, and curating with cultural production and art making, be it in a war zone or be it in any other place, I think that this idea of carving, let's say, new infrastructures and, kind of reshaping or shaping a new something is quite interesting. And in the case, for example, of the Rojava Film Commune, which, it is a stateless state. It's a democracy that is a stateless democracy that carved itself in some sort of vacuum that has been created between Syria and Turkey because of various political reasons, which we need another discussion to say. And through the movement, through the Rojava revolution of Kurds, Assyrians, Yazidis, Arabs, and internationals that have joined, there was a collective of filmmakers that was formed. And for me as a curator, that was extremely interesting because it was one of the few examples that are not historical examples. You mentioned also the socialist examples in the past, where we could actually see, a politicized collective, a politicized artistic practice that is informed by a political movement, is shaped by a political movement, the geopolitics, the history, the reality, the everyday. And I have to say I have learned a lot from the way that they work, which have informed also the way that state of concept is working and will be working. Mainly the fact that there is a shift of power constantly. There are people that take up on roles, and I found this by observing the way that they work, that also it reminds me a little bit how activist collectives work, which is also quite interesting. Or I'm sure that Dimitri has lots of stories of how Chto Delat is shifting responsibilities among them all the time. And I have to say that, not wanting to be melodramatic, but these last 2 years, I opened the Rojava Film Commune exhibition at Moderna Galleria, and it was the beginning of COVID. And I remember we were talking, the two of us, and we were saying, yeah, 1 month, it's going to be fine. It's not. And then, here we are 2 years later, after a 2-year pandemic that has been massive in proportion, and now a war. But yeah, again, not wanting to be melodramatic, I really believe that unfortunately many times life itself and dramatic events makes us reconsider the whole way of working. And it's not just the local and the working in a smaller scale and not taking the plane, etc., etc. It's, I think, also reconsidering, what do we mean by solidarity? What do we mean by working together? What do we mean by redistribution of funds, of sources, so I am hopeful actually for the coming years in terms of curatorial practices and instituting.
Okay. Thank you, iLiana. I think the point of the institutional structure, how it has to be changed, is very, very important. And as the things are changing really in terms of curatorship, and you know, artists are really working the things, in our case, it's more and more in the streets. So I think it's a question of new protocols also, you know, that the institutions, they need new protocols to adapt the things that are going on at the moment. But Dimitri, I will ask you now first to relate a little bit, because I mentioned in my book the two performances you did, or video for Belgrade in 2009, video populism, video partisan songspiel, and then the Angry Sandwiches people, and both somehow relate to this socialist history. So how are you completely disappointed now when the situation is as it is, and you can't anymore find the inspiration in the history, or this is still the source of something, good thoughts, or, you know? And of course, I would like to ask you to relate this to the actual situation in Russia and Ukraine.
Thanks, Zdenka, for question and for invitation to speak about such really crucial things. You know, for us, the issue of that kind of relation to the history and what we call actualization. So we always consider the history in more kind of Benjamin sense, like lost opportunity. So the past full of different, past not fulfilled, you know, we who kind of coming after need to really keep fidelity to certain kind of repressed potentiality of the past. So it's super simple. It has a lot of kind of references in real politics and also in certain type of aesthetics, because actually, you know, you spoke about 3,000 deconstructed monuments to the partisans. We also remember well that kind of different processes of decommunization of happening in Eastern Europe and in Ukraine, unfortunately. Unfortunately, because I guess we need really to reclaim and recall it. We can't, if we simply, because it's still kind of the same fucking limited opposition, fascism or communism, you know? And still we feel that kind of civil war continues. More or less a new front lines, but it's still there. And mentioning these two pieces, they're really related directly to certain kind of legacy of partisan movement in, like we call them like a ghost, you know, and angry sandwich people to Brecht, you know, and all that kind of dialectics of situation. Right now, I would say maybe we need it more than ever, but at the same time, maybe right now hard to speak with a big enthusiasm, you know, like it used to be. But right now, maybe I can allow me to say that sometimes I feel myself like in, you know, in Middle Ages, like, you know, monks sit in the cloister and study some kind of documents from antique times, you know, with a lot of that kind of speaking about democracy, learning Latin, you know, and all that kind of knowledge which was absolutely inaccessible to people around because they simply couldn't read. So right now I feel that we're going more deeper and deeper in that barbarism, you know. That's why I'm really like, maybe it's a very kind of local perspective. It's very hard for me, you know, to engage with society at large. I feel myself more kind of environmentalist. So we need to protect certain values which was taken from us and develop new ideas for possible future, which might come in, I don't know, 100 years or maybe later, I don't know, but this is where we stay. And actually here we should stay and actually do what we can for this kind of things which we keep still considered as very important for human development and vision. But right now it's a super desperate moment and we can't really don't understand how we can do this work. Right now we are really limited to some basic things, but maybe, you know, because actually sometimes when I'm trying to pacify myself a little bit to calm down, I say, okay, man, you know, unfortunately, the war happened before, you know, and our ancestors lived through the periods of war and hunger and so on. But at the same time, they kept for us certain kind of spirit, certain kind of light. And right now, we should really modestly try to do the same, maybe through kind of right now for us, I would say it's the most important thing, it's survival of community. It's millions of people who don't agree with the war. Millions of people, but at the same time, they're really silenced, you know? They're not brave heroes like Ukrainians tell, why you're not going on the street and throw Molotov cocktail? Come on, guys. People have know that culture of violence, you know, they have completely another kind of relation. But at the same time, this community, I hope, has certain kind of value, and we should really keep it as a community and also develop this kind of values together. Sorry, I don't know much to say, but right now we are really limited.
But Dimitri, I think maybe you can, or we can come back to the question, what is happening in Russia at the moment. You know, we know about, you know, it's on the television all the time, what is happening in Ukraine, but we don't know much about the situation in the art scene and the infrastructure. I know that the museum closed their doors in the name of boycott, and maybe a few words about it.
You know, when we chat a little bit before this panel, yeah, I said that actually it was quite amazing how in 1 week the whole Russian contemporary art scene completely collapsed. You know, it doesn't exist simply, you know. And also collapsed also not only internally, it collapsed externally, because right now the biggest issue discussion about so-called cancel Russian culture. Totally, because, you know, in current situation, it's not possible to show any kind of Russian art, even classical one. You can't play Tchaikovsky, you can't read Dostoevsky, because it's, you know, it's all kind of imperial, repressive, colonial kind of things which is hidden there, and right now better not to touch it. So that's a position we might respect, we might disagree with that. So I definitely disagree, because we have really need to a little bit differentiate between culture of emancipation and between culture of colonization. But also it embedded in quite big debate about the coloniality and universality in general kind of international debate. But in Russia, I can't say much, you know, it's a new kind of law where you can't say almost Orwellian, you know, you can't use the word war right now, officially. If you use it, you can only say special operation, you know, and something like we make a joke. So right now, if Lev Tolstoy novel War and Peace should be called Special Operation and Peace. But right now it looks like people are arrested with a sign peace to the world, you know, maybe also peace not possible to use. So it's a lot of stuff, internet, social media pretty much controlled, and some people are taken into investigation for some likes and post and repost of fake news. So it's quite special law on fake news. So, but at the same time, I wouldn't say it's so desperate, because actually one thing I would definitely say, there is no that kind of celebration mood like it was 2014, when it was annexation of Crimea, when it was quite nasty mobilization. Right now it exists, but looks like people mostly on the street are very gloomy, you know, they look like super kind of strengthened, you know, because they feel that something's falling apart. They can't formulate it, whom to blame. Of course, they blame NATO, who has ruined our country through Ukrainian nationalists. That's the official version, you know. they have very little idea what Russian atrocities doing in Ukraine, because it's not really spread on the news. So we'll see, but I guess at the same time, it's such a kind of cosmic powers right now started to play, and devil powers. So very difficult to really do something with them. So I don't know. But there are big communities, anti-war movements of feminist anti-war, different groups, cultural, for example, first time the letter against the war was signed by around 20,000 of cultural workers. Such things never happened before, you know? And some of them start to be fired from state institutions where they have positions, you know? This is kind of big deal, you know? Like teachers losing position and so on. For small things, like for signature, you know?
Okay, when we got our authoritarian government at the same time as pandemic in March 2020, the demonstration protests actually in Ljubljana immediately started, organized mostly by artists, intellectuals, activists, and Ištvan, you were one of them. And I would like that you refer, of course, we at that time we thought that was the most horrible thing that can happen to human being, but now we see that we are in pretty good situation comparing to other countries. Yeah, but still we have the same government, which is not really good news. Hopefully this will change in April when we have elections. Maybe Ištvan, I would actually have for you a question of, first, if you can define a little bit your role and your view on artists' relation to this kind of difficult political, social issues reaction, and how you personally reacted.
Sure, and first of all, thank you for inviting me to talk here, but also to write about my work. Yeah, maybe before the case of Slovenia, I would just like to say that I think again the wave of possible solidarity coming from this union where I live is again kind of past in a way. Because I think that there was so many, from annexation to Crimea till last maybe 4 months of every first page of the Guardian talking about there will be war in Ukraine, there will be war in Ukraine. There was so much talk about it, and maybe it's time to propose this kind of maybe radical utopian solution. What if at that point European Union would just send all of the trucks and all of the trains in Ukraine and evacuate 45 million people into European Union, the whole Ukraine? What would tanks do then? But even more, what would happen to European Union if they would overnight accept 45 million refugees? Why didn't they send Ryanair, EasyJet, Transavia aeroplanes into Syria and hire them and evacuate all Syrians? Anyway, I think again we have another crisis that is a potential solution, but again there is no solution. The endless nightmare continues somehow. Yeah, and then coming back to this Slovenian situation, well, my case was that I lived in Brussels for 10 years, and me and my partner, we planned to move back to Slovenia. So during first lockdown, we were still in Brussels, and we followed the protests, the anti-government protests, via live streams. And there we felt immense frustration with this. We couldn't participate with our bodies. So one of the first major protests that happened in Ljubljana on bicycles, and about 10,000 people in Ljubljana, which is a lot for a country of 2 million. When I saw that on the live stream, at one point when people stopped biking, there was a microphone, and there were people fighting over the microphone. And immediately I felt like, looking at it from the distance, we need some kind of agent that is non-human, because the society is so colorful, they will not decide who will be the speaker for this protest. It will be very difficult to decide this. There will be a fight over this rather than a fight against the government. So I thought, let's create a symbol that everybody would follow. So I went in front of the computer and started designing. And during the partisan times between 41 and 45, there was a common image that was created, which is a shape of 3 spikes, which is a symbol of the highest mountain in Slovenia, which is called Triglav. It means 3 heads. And it was colored red, and it had a letter O and letter F, Osvobodilna Fronta, Liberation Front. So this symbol was written as a graffiti all over Slovenia during the partisan times. So I thought maybe I could use this image, because there is already a pre-existing sentiment to this, and it would activate the rebellion spirit of the citizen. And of course, because during this pandemic times, doing assemblies or protests, it was immediately forbidden, yeah, because of healthy issues. But there was a niche was sports. So you could not be arrested if you were on a bicycle because you were just doing sports. So that's why people engaged with the bicycle. So everybody was on bicycles. And what I did was I used the same shape of the red Triglav, positioned the bicycle in the middle. Moreover, it's a stencil of a bike that you find on the streets, you know, and designating the area where you should bike. So then I launched it via some other artist friends, and it became kind of viral on social media, and people adopted the symbol. So now people had a symbol representing the one thing that they have in common to fight against, instead of focusing on who will hold the voice, right? So this was my immediate reaction to this situation of protesting. And I mean, I must stress also now that at the moment, I'm not going to my studio since a year and a half. I don't do the same practice that I change in the pandemic in Slovenia. So I'm just engaged with various activist groups, basically. One of them surrounds, it's activist groups of workers in the cultural field, but then there's the Protest People's Assembly, some other groups that are anonymous because they do some kind of more night actions and so on and so on. But I felt like that I need to engage fully with this. And of course, it's also an opportunity to create images, of course, sometimes with also a lot of humor. One of the last ones that we presented was a huge sign that said, Putin equals Orban equals Janša. Orban is the leader of Hungary, Janša is the leader of Slovenia, Putin is the leader of Russia, but kind of trying to equalize them. And we brought it to the protest for peace. And that is because, of course, the illiberal leader of Slovenia at the moment, Janša, is abusing the Ukrainian war. Yesterday, he was in Kiev shaking hands with Zelensky. So, I mean, this guy is fucking crazy. We have to get rid of him on the next elections. That's the 24th of April. And with this little gesture that we did on the last peace march, we just wanted to do our own part. I think what we can do is try to show that Janša truly is a fascist, maybe not the same fascist as the fascist in the 1930s, but let's say the new authoritarian kind of leader, and that there are many of those, and those together are the problem. And I think this is what I can do. Zdenka didn't mention, but there was a conference some days ago here in Ljubljana with some people coming there, but some people also joined with via Zoom, and one of them was also Nikita Kadan from Kiev, artist, and he was on Zoom with us from a shelter, and at one point, I think rightfully frustrated and scared, but very articulate and had a nice speech. But at one point, he asked us to send munition, or maybe even come and join the fight. And I felt shame. I felt very weird when he said that. It brought me back to the stories of, I don't know, Lord Byron or Ernest Hemingway, volunteering and going now to Ukraine or something like that. It felt extremely weird.
Yeah.
I didn't go to Ukraine. I'm not going to go and fight with the guns.
Yeah.
But what I can do is try to fight against the same kind of oppressive movement that is happening here now in Slovenia. These extreme nationalists that are threatening us like that.
Okay. I think this is a very, very good point, and it leads to the question of solidarity and care. Ileana, you wrote and you work a lot on this question of care since the pandemic and everything. But now we have again shift. How to be solidary, from very gentle, caring, whatever. Approach to military, and I told you before, we were asked recently, the curators in international organization to issue the petition of opening the sky above Ukraine. It's there are very direct and very different needs for solidarity today. Ileana, can you comment on it?
Yeah, I think they're both connected, and I just want to kind of round it to the beginning of the conversation as well. I think it's nice to kind of connect how at the moment we're all witnessing selective solidarities. You very rightfully said, Zdenka, that although we're all applauding and we're all very happy and very proud that for once the European Union is actually really enacting the union that it once proposed that it is, a safe haven for democracy and freedom. We can discuss whether it was that ever, but anyway. But I mean, I'm coming from Greece, and talking about the situated knowledges that Donna Haraway discusses, I read every day of people dying in the Aegean because the European Union decides to drown persons of color. It's as simple as that. So this idea of selective solidarity is, for me, the problem. And that's why I think in terms of culturally discussing about solidarity, it's important to have your book and really flesh out what is solidarity. And to link it with care, we're talking about care as something, the idea of care itself has been so much feminized, and we're thinking it's something soft, it's something, innate, also almost also for women. We kind of have to care for things more because we're designed that way. But I mean, I'm a fan of Audre Lorde, and I will go to the idea of care as an act of political warfare, that caring for myself and caring for others and caring for my community. So self-care is also caring for others, not just for myself. And at this very moment, again, to also link it with the middle of the conversation, like with Dimitri, I have to care about my community, and my community is artists, and I refuse to cancel everyone that is Russian because they're holding a Russian passport. I refuse to participate in these types of tactics because I really find them completely non-democratic. And I am appalled, I have to say, by the the hypocrisy of the art world of not caring when Putin went into Russia, into Syria, and started murdering my Kurdish friends from the Rojava Film Commune 2 years ago, and nobody proposed for the Turkish or the Russian pavilion to be cancelled then, just to give an example. I'm sorry that I'm ranting, but like, it's so important to really, discuss solidarity and care at this very moment and reconfiguring them, like recontour them anew completely and understand them as like acts that can be violent in quotation marks, like can be really rough, because care is not just the pink hearts and flowers and all of us singing happy songs. It can be like really political acts that are difficult. And Ištvan, I'm also not going to go to war for anyone because I don't believe in war. I think that, turbo capitalism and neoliberalism are leading us to wars, and we don't need wars. Sorry for the rant.
Okay. I don't know.
I want to be aware of the time here and also open up to questions, so I don't keep you guys for too much longer than promised.
Okay, so let's open it for the questions.
Yeah. If anyone wants to type it or unmute and jump in. Yes, Laura.
Hi, I'm Laura Thomas. I'm fairly new to SVA. I teach in the Humanities and Sciences department. I teach college writing to first-year students. And I just wanted to tell you thank you, because besides sharing your knowledge with us today and giving us some concrete ways to phrase this for our students as they try to process what's going on. Why am I upset? Why are my parents upset? Why are my teachers shambolic wrecks who can hardly teach because they've been up all night thinking about their sons getting sent to Europe to die in some rich old man's war pig war. And hearing it though, being gathered together in space, even if it isn't what Kurzweil calls meet space, Zoom space, hearing the pain in your voice, hearing you're witnessing just to wanting to help and feeling like you can't. And when, I'm sorry, I'm not good with names, but when you said you felt sorry that you couldn't go and fight, you are fighting. And what I love about what SVA is trying to do with activism and permitting us to teach in our classes today, I talked with my first year writing students about Woody Guthrie and how he stuck a sticker on his guitar, "This machine kills fascism." And we talked about the act, because I'm very angry that they take my tax dollars. Not that there are many, SVA, because you don't pay your adjuncts, right? But they take my tax dollars and they open up a camp and they torture some mother's sons, waterboarding them with my tax dollars. I mean, rant, and I can't do that in front of my students or I'll get fired. But what I can do is talk about "This machine kills fascists" stickers. And we did that today. And then I asked them to think about protest folk singing as a form of rhetoric. And I mean, I am with you when you said, I don't want to sing songs, on my way to the gas. No, I don't. I'm not going to sing while you're getting marched to the gas. "This Way for the Gas," ladies and gentlemen, is the book I'm trying to reference by Tadeusz Borowski. I can't say it right in his name, but so I told them about how Pete Seeger used to sing Guantanamera, and how that was an act of protest, and how I learned what little Spanish I know singing, because my dad would pull out the Pete Seeger songbook and we'd sing Guantanamera. I had no idea what Guantanamo was. And when he taught a song that's so catchy and that you love, and its lyrics are something that I took to my heart. I can't quote them from memory because I'm so worked up and other people should get to speak. But when you say I throw in my lot with the poor of the world, and you teach me how to say that in Spanish, and then I can go sing it to people, that machine can kill fascists. Yes, it can. So thank you for letting me talk.
Thank you, Laura.
So, Brian, do we have time for one question more, or we should?
I think unless there's a burning question, we're pretty much out of time. Unless anyone wants to jump in. Okay. Final comments or remarks? There's so much to say. I think it's better just to
Yeah.
Just that it's very important that we're talking about these things. I feel like solidarity is a really important concept. It's great that we get to talk about it.
Yes, and I think also Zdenka's focus on the book on unexpected, on the unexpectedness of voices is really important. I mean, as Ištvan was saying, also I keep having these. I keep having conversations in the last couple of days, imagining a scenario of becoming armed. You know, so in terms of these unexpected voices, it's really true that even if we're not actually fighting, some part of us is also thinking in a different in a different mode, right? And imagining. And imagining also armed struggle as a much more concrete reality.
As curators and artists, I mean, to Dimitri's group, the translation in English, what is to be done? Mm-hmm. You know, that's obviously the reason that we're meeting and what we're all thinking about. What is to be done? How can we move forward in the face of the catastrophe now at hand? Before that, as the conversation began, before that it was the pandemic. But at this moment, for all of us, how, if we are not going and picking up a gun, if we are thinking structurally and logistically and strategically, what is to be done? That's, I think, a way to end by throwing the challenge to each of us creatively. How do we do that? How do we move forward? Is it possible that we can, in fact, do something? And having had the pleasure of editing the powerful essay that you wrote, you know, you point to ways that others have done it before. So I'm looking forward to the book being out so that we can share your thoughts with everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Zdenka, Dimitri, iLiana, Ištvan.
Thank you. It was lovely.
Thank you. So see you soon somewhere.
Yeah. Well, Zdenka may be in Athens. You come and talk about the book in Athens as well.
I have to come. Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.